Alright, it is a new day, and I'm gonna get through this. I just had to stop where it was last night. I don't want to spend the rest of the video like having a breakdown, and so I don't really expect these things to happen, you know. Just things that I don't talk about. I don't really have anybody to talk to them about anyway, and you move on, and it doesn't affect you in your everyday life that you know of anyway. And then you start talking about it, it just brings you back there. Like at this point now in my present, you know, there's no way in which the Catholic Church could disappoint me because I know what it is now. But talking about that situation brings me back to what I felt like when I was a devout Catholic and trusted in the Catholic Church and believed that it was of God and not of the devil. And so even though in present day it's really no skin off my back anymore, you guys know what I mean. I'm sure everybody to an extent has experienced that, particularly people with PTSD. We have issues processing things and categorizing and compartmentalizing and stuff like that. So yeah, so basically what was supposed to be 3 days with Father Chad Rippinger and minimum of 4 to 6 hours of exorcism prayers and testing prayers over a 3-day period with some interview, and then deliberation, communication, and basically within that week decision on how to proceed. I went there for basically a cheap piece of pizza, 15 minutes of prayer, waiting for the wrecker for hours the first day. The second day, less than 30 minutes of prayers, asked for a break, went to the restroom, drank a glass of water, was told two completely conflicting different things by Paranello, who's not experienced, who then decided to start playing doctor, where I'm being told that after I'd already been basically getting therapy and psychological testing, and I had all that done, in Arlington, I had it done before, everywhere, basically from the time I was 20, 21, like it just turned 21, I had been evaluated and received therapy and analyzed and psychoanalyzed more than anybody that I've ever met. And it's not something that was going to progress any further from that point. And so we've got this priest that doesn't know what he's doing. And anybody who's ever been in the situation long enough would know that. But regardless, you have this priest who's saying the same thing that's been going back and forth from day one. So yeah, you've got these severe demonic problems that need to be taken care of, but the psychological trauma is holding it in, and we need to deal with that first. Yet the psychological trauma and the other dioceses and everything else had already determined that it's completely the other way around. The trauma and stuff that had happened to me can't be dealt with because it's being held in by demonic forces. And so it's a no-win situation, really. But again, in that place at that time where I was, that was everything. That was it for me. And so as I was sitting in that car and hearing what was so familiar in a sense, just let down, betrayal, just being completely set aside, disregarded, just misjudged completely. And once again, finding myself in a position where it was, that's when the crack started. That's when the tear in my mind and my soul, whatever it is, I mean, it felt like a very holistic thing to me. It's like I was sitting there, and it was as if my entire life was flashing before my eyes, like they say how it does before you die, or if you have a near-death experience, which I've had those two, one particularly specifically that actually kind of did happen. So it's like everything all at once was together right in front of me, and I could see it. And the weight of that, everything that I had invested and sacrificed and done and given up and had faith in, and everything, all of myself. There was nothing that I held back, you know. And the two things could no longer sit together. It was as if I had to choose one, yet neither was bearable. It's going to be very difficult for me to describe this. It was as if the blow that would have been felt had I not split in that moment from what had happened and what was registering. It was as if my mind, my soul, whatever, knew that I could not handle it. Like I was literally going to end up in a psych ward forever, like mute or something, and knew that I could not handle the magnitude of what's happening again. And so it was like there's this block. It's almost like just this like invisible force field just comes in front of you, like covers you up so it can't reach you, but you can see it. You know, the glass is kind of clear, but it's unbreakable, it's bulletproof. Nothing from the outside can quite get in and penetrate. Like you just can't process it. It's not going to hit you in the same way. But it's like being frozen, like stuck in this never-ending, the state of it, there's not a word. I don't have a word for it. Because in a way it was blocking, like, kind of like, I would say the sharpness of the knife that was coming down. But I guess kind of take that feeling when you're super sick with the flu and you've got to vomit, like you've got to puke, but you can't. Have you ever been sick, like where you have to throw up and you have to vomit, but you can't? Like your body won't let you for some reason. And you're just stuck in that state of being as sick as possible, like right before you would throw up, but you can't. That's what it was like in every other way. It was being as sick as possible, as traumatized as possible, as terrified as possible, as devastated as possible, but not being able to release anything, not being able to process anything. And so it was like a balloon that just filled up too much and could not contain the air anymore. It just cracked. It just busts. And then what happened is I don't know if I could have talked or not at that time. I don't know. But I know that I didn't, and I felt that I couldn't. And so I remember sitting in the car and Laura talking. I'm sorry, I already said her name in the other video that's already posted, but everybody knows who she is, and people who don't know aren't going to know her. So I apologize, I can't go through this again, just to remove the name. So there's so many Lauras anyway. She's talking in the car. We're driving back to the hotel, I think. And I couldn't talk. I think she asked me questions or tried to talk to me a couple times, and I couldn't talk. I couldn't answer. It was like as if any move that I made could be the death of me. I was just stuck again. And we got back to the hotel. And before we got back to the hotel, she had her first outburst at me. And I'm going to say right now, I forgive this woman. I do love her very much, whether she believes that or not. The reason that I forgive her for what's about to follow and other things is because I know that she is such a broken person. She doesn't want to hurt anybody. She didn't want to hurt me. She just could not I mean, I obviously couldn't handle the situation either. And it's different because it was me and my life and my soul and my mind and my heart and everything that was being completely destroyed. But as somebody who cared and was invested, everybody has their weaknesses, and I know hers, at least some of them, and I'm certainly not going to cast any stones at her, that's for sure. I'd have no place to do that. So what I'm about to communicate is simply and only in the purpose of it is just to explain what happened with me and the breakdown and how I came to where I was there. So whatever was happening, I know that I didn't raise my voice, not even once. I could barely open my mouth at all. And I think I might have answered small questions here and there, or just said, I don't know, or I can't talk about it, or whatever. I don't remember everything regarding what was said back and forth. But I know that it was either what I answered or that I didn't answer, or what I didn't say. There was something that would trigger her, and then she'd start yelling at me. And when we were in the car before we got back to the hotel, the first time she started yelling at me, it was like as if it shoved me deeper into this state of split. So I guess kind of like you've got a wedge coming down and splitting a piece of wood, and it's kind of stuck right here, and then something else comes along and pushes it down further. That's kind of like what it was. So the split had started when I was in the SUV in the driveway, when I heard them outside talking, and we were told not to come back. And then throughout the rest of the day and night, it continued splitting and splitting and splitting, and she ended up being the tool, unfortunately, and if she didn't want to be, and again, I forgive her and I don't think it was intentional, that ended up splitting deeper and deeper and deeper until I was just completely, there really wasn't any coming back from it at that point. And so she had an outburst at me, and I just froze. I couldn't process anything. There's no other way for me to describe it. Went back to the hotel room, and we were still there. We couldn't come home. We couldn't go back to Virginia, even though they wouldn't let us come back the next day for the third day, even though there really wasn't a second day or a first day to begin with, because of our flight. And so we had that entire, pretty much all afternoon, all evening, all night on the second day at the hotel, and then the full third day at the hotel, and then the next day until the airplane, until we went to take off at the airport the next morning or afternoon, whenever it was. So it was about a 48-hour period that we were together at the hotel with, and it did not go well. I remember the guy that I was in a relationship with at the time, I had called him. I think he was the only person that I talked to, really, after that happened. I remember being in the bathroom making the phone calls because I was trying to get some privacy. And I remember him being devastated and on the phone telling me that not to be afraid, not to worry, because he wasn't going to leave me and everything was going to be fine, and that I had him and that he loved me and we didn't have to worry about anything. He promised he'd never, ever abandon me. He'd never leave me. I think that was mainly the only source of comfort, even though it was very little of one. I thought to myself, you know what? Yeah, maybe I'll deal with this possession the rest of my life, but he's seen it, and he knows what it is, and he's still saying he loves me and is not going to leave me, despite how toxic the relationship was in other ways. I think that's probably what kept me alive that night. the woman who was with me, I got into the bed immediately when we got back to the hotel. And I remember just feeling like I wanted to fall asleep and die and not wake up. I was having manifestations. I remember now. I was having manifestations of my, it was a muscular thing. Horrendous, if anybody's ever experienced restless leg syndrome, but like throughout your whole body, but times 1,000 with a demonic twist, that's what it's like. I couldn't control my muscles and lie still. It was extremely painful and uncomfortable. And everything's going to be kind of scattered over the next 48 hours, but mainly what ensued was, within the first hour of when that happened, with Paranello telling us to leave and not come back, she was on the phone with her husband. Alright, so within that first hour, she was in the car encouraging me, oh, it's okay, God's gonna fix this, there's no way, we'll pray and then they'll come to their senses and, they'll ask us to come back as usual tomorrow. We don't know what's going on, but it's just an attack. And so at first she was on board, and like at first she was saying the same thing that other people were saying, that they weren't going to like abandon me and everything was going to be fine and we were just going to continue forward. But within that hour, she was on the phone with her husband telling him a story that was not true. And another reason I'm saying I forgive this woman, I don't even know that she knows it wasn't true. I think that what had happened truly was so traumatizing. And there's no way it was as traumatizing for her as it was for me, but I think it was still traumatizing for her. And this woman, because of her weaknesses and the fact that she was a devout Catholic as well, we were all just putty in the devil's hands, really. And so it just uses us as weapons against each other in the end. She couldn't handle the truth either. So I could even hear it going down, because we're in the same hotel room. She's talking to him and they're going back and forth, and this is just so horrible. But then there's this, oh wait, maybe she's not possessed anymore. Maybe she was liberated back at Easter time when she told us she thought all this stuff was expelled. And then all of a sudden it just turned into this whole other story, and she said things that were never said. And just came up, like I said, with this more palatable version, not even a version, but an entirely different story. And that's when I realized, A, she wasn't going to stick with reality regarding it. And then that was another split in the wedge, because now I realized, great, now she's going on this side where I'm just this nutcase. I don't need help anymore. So everybody can feel better and just, send Danielle on her way. And then I found out that he also was going along with that. And before you know it, the town that we lived in, it's like you can't say something without it getting around to everybody by that evening. I mean, there's just no way around it. The gossip is so horrendous in that town. And it's constant. It's constant. And I just wanted to sleep. I was so exhausted. There was nothing that I could do. I remember feeling temptations to suicide, but I was so tired. I was too tired to even consider it at the time, really. So, like, even though I was having those feelings, I was like, all right, well, after I sleep. So I tried to go to sleep. And instead what started happening was, and again, I think she was being influenced by the demonic. It was pretty obvious to me, to harass me the entire 48 hours in that room. I forgive her. I don't think she was aware of what she was doing. I would ask so calmly. I mean, I was dead. It was just like, even right now, I'm just very feeling it a lot, but I could never possibly 100% go back to what that was. It's not something that I can bring myself to. I would say, Lord, please, I just want to sleep. I cannot talk about anything right now. Because she just wanted to talk. This was her. She just wanted to talk about it all the time. And this was in life with everything. She just had to talk about it. She just had to talk about it with me. She couldn't deal with sitting with it herself and letting me sleep. I had to be up and talk about it with her. And I couldn't. And what happened over that 48 hours, because I feel like if I get into it in too detail and bring myself back there, that it's going to have an actually detrimental effect on me possibly right now. So I'm not going to do that. But over the next 48 hours, it literally escalated. I ended up begging her just to let me sleep. And with not even an hour would pass, every hour, she would get angrier and angrier that I wouldn't talk to her, that I wouldn't discuss it, that I just wanted to sleep. And she would yell, and then it would escalate. And the next time she would yell, and then it would escalate. The next time she threw something at me, and then it would escalate. The next time she yelled, she started staying out in the lobby in the hotel instead of in the room to get away from me. But within every single hour, she would come back in. And no matter how it started, whether it was, I'm sorry, but I just need to ask this, or I just need to talk about it, she would not she would not leave me be. And I was literally trying to somehow, even though there's no manual on this, nobody knows how to stop themselves from having a complete nervous breakdown, split crack, I was trying to keep more damage at bay and just sleep and hopefully process. And instead, I was just being picked at and harassed and yelled. It just turned into this. I was literally being bullied by this woman who I knew loved and cared about me. But again, it was like being in hell. It was like being puppets in hell. And I'm sure that whoever had come with me would have been affected heavily, would have been attacked heavily anyways, because of the situation that we were in. But every time she came back in and every time she started yelling at me, it got worse and louder. And she said more horrible things. And it just continued damaging me further and further and further. To the point where by the time we got on the plane to go back to Virginia and when we landed in DC, I guess it would have been Dulles International, I was no longer whoever I was before. I felt like an empty shell, a hollow shell. But at the same time, I wasn't completely numb, which I hated. Obviously, I wish I could have been. But it was just this complete state of almost purposelessness, worthlessness, hopelessness, just nothingness. Nothingness. To backtrack one more time, over the 48 hours that we were in the hotel, certain family members begged. I tried to reach out. People tried to reach out, and Perinella would not budge. Like I said, he never took the documents and paperwork to look over. There was never any deliberation with Rippinger. Rippinger he didn't even care enough to know that I was there. And this is what I found out later. Because the woman who came with me has a daughter who was married. I don't think they were married yet. I think they were engaged to a man who knew Rippinger and had called ahead of time the week before. It was a few days before we flew out. And said, I just wanted to call in and check on because we have a friend that's going to be flying out there to see you and blah, 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 blah. I don't know what it was he was asking him about. But apparently, Rippinger's like, who? Danielle DeClue, who? He was never going to be there. He forgot about me completely months ago. And they knew and didn't tell me on purpose. They all knew. They all knew I was flying to Tulsa. and that there would be no exorcist. I'm just going to move on from that one. So yeah, over that 48-hour period, she brought up anything and everything. And of course, she brought up her son and I. And every other situation that she could possibly have that might have been burdening her. And it got to the point where I couldn't fight her. Like, I would ask her not to and beg her not to, and she'd get mad and yell and storm out of the room, and I would cry and then just try to fall asleep again. And it was like being tortured. It literally was like being tortured. There's still parts of this that I can't even talk about and speak about because my mind, I know, has just blocked it out. Everything that came out of her mouth was more upsetting. Just things that were completely inappropriate for somebody to say at that time. Like the worst things that you could say to somebody in that moment. And this is why I don't believe it was normal at all, and which is why I do forgive her and I don't hold it against her. But had I had a gun that day, I probably would have shot myself for sure. For sure. If I had never felt abandoned by God in my entire life, I did at that point. What I didn't know is I was worshiping and bowing before a pagan sun god. I didn't know that. People think that, you know, they just know so much better. Like, because they believe this is God or they believe that is God, then it's so. Or, you know, as a Catholic, you sit there and you think about the idiots in the desert that started worshiping idols again instead of God, and then ended up in the desert for 40 years. You know, you think about these things and you think these people are just stupid and deliberate, but in reality, they have attachments to the idea of who they think God is, and the Queen of Heaven, and all these different things. We landed in the airport and I was disconnected from my body in a way. I walked, but I couldn't really feel myself walking. It was almost kind of like gliding. I don't know how to explain it. Everything just happened and I was just there, but I wasn't really doing anything. I do not know how else to explain it besides that, which is why I feel like this video is going to come off sounding like it makes absolutely no sense, because I don't know that it's possible for me to actually explain what happened. And that's why there's many times I've told certain people, you don't know what happened in Oklahoma. I've never told anybody everything that happened in Oklahoma. And I never will tell everybody and everything that happened in Oklahoma, because I know there's things that I know that that my brain is protecting me from, that my mind is protecting me from. But the gist of it. I wasn't even back for a full month before I had left for South Carolina, because from the time I landed back in Dulles, nothing anybody promised or said came to fruition. It was made clear that I wasn't welcome in their home because I wouldn't break up and get out of the situation with their son. The little girls, who were the only light in my life left at that point, were withheld from me. As a tool to get back at me. They were withheld from me, and so when I moved to South Carolina, by somehow, the guy got, the older of the two sisters, got to come and say goodbye to me. But I never got to see. I never got to see her say goodbye to Sophia. And, you know, I've hated myself for it. It wasn't my choice, but I've hated myself for it. I just destroyed myself, hating myself, and feeling like such a failure. And thinking, you know, what does she think? She thinks she's not as important as Maura is to me. That I didn't care enough to say goodbye to her. Because I can tell you right now, nobody told them that the reason I didn't say goodbye was